Nearly 20 years after its original release, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater has returned, rebuilt from the ground up as Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. For many, Snake Eater isn't just a highlight of the Metal Gear franchise. It's often called one of the greatest video games ever made, a perfect blend of stealth gameplay, survival mechanics, and cinematic storytelling. That reputation also creates enormous pressure. When you remake a game this important, expectations are unforgiving. Fans want the nostalgia preserved, but they also demand modern polish. New players want accessibility without losing the depth that makes Snake Eater iconic. So the question is simple: does Delta live up to that legacy? Is this a remake that brings Snake Eater to a new generation while honoring what made it legendary? Or does it stumble under the weight of its history? In this review, we'll break it down: the gameplay systems, the survival mechanics, the boss fights, the presentation, and whether this is truly the definitive way to experience Snake Eater. The foundation of Snake Eater has always been stealth, and Delta keeps that at the heart of the experience. Sneaking through the jungle still feels tense and deliberate, but now it's smoother. Snake's animations have been modernized, crawling through grass, crouching low, leaning into cover. It all feels natural and fluid compared to the PS2 version. The enemy AI has seen real improvement. Guards don't just patrol on predictable loops. They react more dynamically to sounds, movement, and even subtle changes in the environment. Step on branches, reload too loudly, or move too quickly through shallow water, and there is a good chance they'll investigate. When suspicion builds, they don't just give up after a few seconds. They stay alert, forcing you to really think about how to slip past. The camouflage system is also back. In the original, constantly digging through the menus to swap camo broke immersion. Delta streamlines the process so it's quicker and less intrusive, while still requiring you to pay attention to your surroundings. Blending into the jungle, the swamp, or military outpost is still critical, but it no longer feels like the gameplay has to stop every time you need to adjust. Then there's the survival aspect, one of the features that made Snake Eater stand out in the first place. Snake isn't invincible here. He gets hungry, his stamina drains, and injuries don't heal on their own. If you're shot, you need to remove the bullet, disinfect the wound and bandage it. Break a bone, you'll need to resplint it. These mechanics might sound like extra steps, but they ground the experience. They remind you that Snake isn't a superhero. He's a soldier relying on grit and resourcefulness. That sense of vulnerability creates tension that no other stealth game really matches. Combat has also been polished. Snake Eater was never meant to be an action game, but sometimes stealth fails, and you're forced into direct encounters. In the original, those moments could feel clunky and awkward. Here, close quarters combat is more responsive and firearms feel more modern. You're still at a disadvantage in open combat, but you no longer feel like you're fighting the control as much as the enemies. It makes those desperate moments when a guard spots you and the alarm goes off feel more manageable without losing the tension. And of course, the boss fights. The true highlights of Snake Eater are here in full force. The remake preserves every detail of these legendary encounters. The sniper duel with the end remains a slow, methodical test of patience, now enhanced with sharper visuals and AI that feels just a bit more unpredictable. The Fury's flamethrower battle is still chaotic and overwhelming, the screen filled with fire and smoke as you fight to stay alive. And that final fight with the boss, one of the most emotional climaxes in gaming history, has never looked or felt better. Every strike carries weight, every parry feels desperate, and the cinematic presentation amplifies the heartbreak of that battle. What Delta gets right is that it doesn't tamper with these moments. It knows they work perfectly in the original. Instead, it modernizes the systems around them so that new players can experience them without the friction of the outdated mechanics. If gameplay shows how faithfully Delta preserves Snake Eater's identity, presentation is where the remake really demonstrates its value. The jungles of the Soviet wilderness have never looked better. Dense foliage, shifting light, and small details like water rippling as Snake moves through swamps all contribute to a setting that feels alive. On PS2, the vision was ambitious but limited by hardware. In Delta, the world finally matches the mood Snake Eater was aiming for all along: harsh, mysterious, and unpredictable. Character models have been completely reworked, with detail that makes cutscenes and gameplay flow together seamlessly. Snake's expressions are subtle but powerful. You see the strain of survival on his face, the determination during combat, and the quiet moments of reflection in cutscenes. These details might seem small, but they add emotional weight and makes the story hit harder. Cutscenes are one of the defining features of Metal Gear Solid, and the remake respects that legacy. Every scene is recreated shot for shot with modern rendering, preserving Kojima's original cinematic framing and pacing. It feels authentic, but with sharper detail, realistic lighting, and smoother animation. What was already a cinematic experience in 2004 is now presented with a clarity that rivals modern film quality visuals. Audio design plays an equally important role. The remake retains the original voice recordings, carefully remastered for clarity. That decision preserves the identity of the Snake Eater. The voices you remember are still the voices you hear. Combined with updated audio mixing, the performances feel as impactful today as they did 2 decades ago. And then there's the soundtrack. Snake Eater's score has always been iconic, and the remake gives it a richer, more layered sound. The stealth tracks build tension, boss fight music adds energy, and the legendary Snake Eater theme still gives the game its unforgettable personality. Hearing it again in this new presentation is one of those nostalgic punches that instantly transport you back. Finally, the little environmental touches are what really sell the immersion. The crunch of dry leaves under Snake's boots, the hum of insects in the jungle, the quiet shift in the atmosphere before enemies close in. Together, these elements create a world that feels alive, dangerous, and fully believable. If the gameplay proves that Delta is still Snake Eater at its core, the presentation proves that this is Snake Eater at its best. So does Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater succeed as a remake? Yes, because it doesn't try to reinvent Snake Eater, it restores it. The remake keeps everything that made the 2004 original a masterpiece. The tactical stealth, the survival mechanics, the unforgettable boss fights, and the Cold War atmosphere. But it modernizes the experience just enough so that it feels natural in 2025. Smoother controls, streamlined camouflage, improved combat flow, and presentation that finally matches the scale of the story. That said, it's not a remake that takes risks. You won't find bold new content or dramatic reinterpretations of the original design. Some players may see that as a missed opportunity, but I think that restraint is part of the reason this works. Snake Eater was already near perfect in its design. Delta respects that and focuses on refinement instead of reinvention. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater succeeds because it isn't a reinvention, it's a restoration. It keeps the stealth, the survival mechanics, the legendary boss fights, but smooths the controls and upgrades the presentation for today. If you've never played Snake Eater, this is the definitive version, and if you're returning, it's the perfect way to relive one of the greatest games ever made. For newcomers, Delta is the essential way to experience one of the most important games in video game history, and for longtime fans, it's a faithful reminder of why Snake Eater mattered, why it defines stealth action, why its story still resonates, and why Metal Gear remains a landmark franchise. This isn't just a remake for nostalgia's sake. It's a preservation of one of gaming's finest hours, updated so it can stand tall in a new generation. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more in-depth reviews and retrospectives here on GamesOracle. And let me know in the comments how you feel about Delta. Did it live up to your memories of the original, or is this your first time stepping into Snake Eater's jungle? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.